Donald Trump has hit the grand slam and has received his fourth indictment, this time coming from the great state of Georgia. We here on the left wing have been calling this indictment the big one, and we'll be discussing why that is today. I'm John Cooper from Counterpoint Politics, joined by my co-host, Dr. Erica from Cocktails and Capitalism, recurring guest TJ Whitehead from Powers Taken Not Given, and first-time guest Leah from Socialist Sleuths. With that, let's get started. So there are three main reasons I believe that this is the biggest and most threatening indictment Trump is facing. First, since it is being prosecuted in state courts, Trump will not have the power to stop it, even if he does win the presidency in 2024. If that happens, it would create a very interesting constitutional conflict, which will have self-proclaimed party of small government conservatives arguing that the head of the federal government is immune from prosecution from state governments. I certainly don't want nor think that Trump will win the presidency, but that would be extremely interesting to watch play out. But the second reason that this is so big is because the state of Georgia is prosecuting using RICO laws, the kind of laws that are used to take down criminal organizations like the mob. These laws were specifically created to take down the heads of criminal conspiracies, even when they use plausible deniability to claim that their actions weren't intended to enact some wider conspiracy to commit a crime. We all know that Trump is a master of using plausible deniability to defend some of his more insidious actions, and that his only real explanation of the actions that led to January 6th is plausible deniability. So what I'm saying here is that the prosecutors in Georgia aren't fucking around. They know exactly what weapons to bring to this fight. And lastly, it's so big because we heard on the tape very clearly and obviously that he was committing a crime. The crimes that he was accused of, we have tape of him doing it. We knew this years ago, and this is why we've been saying this is going to be the big one, because I don't know how he's going to wiggle out of it. Here are two clips from the recording of Trump's phone call with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, which show him threatening a government official if he doesn't find him enough votes to win the presidency.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes. It's more illegal for you than it is for them because you know what they did and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal offense. And you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you and to Ryan, your lawyer. That's a big risk.
Now, that audio is the cornerstone of this case, in my opinion, but it only accounts for a fraction of the charges. The charges are far too long to cover them all here, but Trump and 18 of his associates, including Mr. Four Seasons Landscaping himself, Rudy Giuliani, are being charged with 162 acts of criminal conspiracy to unlawfully change the outcome of the election in favor of Trump. In addition to the phone call with Brad Raffensperger, other key pieces of evidence for this conspiracy include the Trump team's lies to government officials about fraudulent votes being counted, tampering with voting machines, stealing election data, and intimidating witnesses, among other things. TJ, you are on record saying on this show that you don't think Trump will actually be going to jail if found guilty. Do you still think that? Because I think he might be going to jail.
Yeah. I do think that Trump, he will be found guilty, I believe, most likely, but I can't see him being sentenced to like an actual penitentiary. I think that he's going to be like under house arrest. That's the most likely scenario, and because the logistics with the Secret Service, like what do? They have to be with him at all times. You can imprison them as well. It's weird. So I think that a house arrest is going to be the most likely outcome. But I mean, honestly, though, the entire thing is just a travesty because he did everything right and they indicted him. I can't believe this. It's a miscarriage of justice of the highest order. And it's fun. What's really funny to me about this is I've gone on record. One of the predictions I'm most proud of is that this time last year, everyone was hyping up Ron DeSantis and kissing his ass and saying DeSantis is going to be like the Trump without the baggage. And from day one, I said, DeSantis is going nowhere against Trump. There's no possible way he could beat him. And I've never felt more vindicated. And with the whole, and I was mystified as to why DeSantis was running in the first place. I couldn't figure it out. It's like, Donald Trump is the flagship bearer of the Republican Party. Like they love this guy. They would run into traffic for him. Why would you stand up against him? And then it made sense later on. It's like, DeSantis probably knew about definitely the Florida, the indictment coming there. And he says, okay, well, maybe he'll be weakened enough and I can get on there. But what's happened is predictably is that every indictment makes Trump even stronger. It reminds me of like in the Avengers when Thor was fighting Iron Man and Thor kept hitting Iron Man with bolts of lightning and it just made his suit more and more powerful. That's what's going on with the indictments. But it's only going to work for the primaries. He's definitely going to win those. But when he gets to the general, it's going to crush him. Trump has no chance to win the general whatsoever. But this is just assuming that Trump and Biden are both alive this time next year, which is an open question. I mean, this is if our suspicions are correct and we are living in hell or a weird TV show, the best twist possible is to have one or both of them die. And see, because
that wouldn't be the hellscape that we know so well. Like if we could get rid of them, then we wouldn't be suffering to the extent that we are now. I mean, even back to your point about Trump not serving jail time, a part of me is like, would the political apparatus that not only gains so much profit from Trump and just his drama and all of that and the media that exists with it, but on top of that, how much control he has over the Republicans currently, would they allow their little baby to go into jail? No, they're going to fight it tooth and nail. And that's where I kind of fall back on the house arrest thing of like, especially with the Secret Service and everything, like there's no jail that they're going to find apt or like good enough for little baby Trump. However, with that said, like there is a part of me that is like, will house arrest be enough? And also at what time is all of this going to go down? Because that's really my question, is the timeline. Is like Georgia, I would agree with you, is the big one. But in terms of timeline with them being alive next year, but also like during election season, where are we going to be in terms of Trump going to jail process? Like how far out are we? Because there's a difference between voting for someone who is on their way to jail in the primary versus voting for someone who is currently in jail in the primary. And I think that that's going to be, even for house arrest, I think that that's going to be an interesting conversation to have.
For the Republicans, though, like, you think they're going to care? I can't imagine a Republican primary voter caring.
They
if he's
don't
in jail
want him to win. Don't get me wrong. They're doing literally everything in their power to prop up everyone from Tim Scott. Is that his name? It's so boring that I can't remember his name. So there's him. Obviously Chris Christie or whatever, he's trying to tear down Trump single-handedly and is not taking his campaign seriously in terms of winning. And then there's DeSantis putting fingers. Putting fingers, I agree with you. I actually was wrong. I was someone who, I was not like you. I was not vindicated. I was proven wrong in the past year because I kind of did think that DeSantis was fascist enough to where he could gain some popularity from the right wingers, but his personality is so dry that this man took literally the opportunity of a silver platter of like, your opponent has how many charges up against him and your personality still managed to make you lose. Like that's worse than, was it Jeb Bush? Is that his name? I'm sorry. These names sound so fake to me, but anyway. So I think that especially with DeSantis, like I thought that he was going to have more of a successful campaign than he did. Now looking at his ads that are made by 4chan users, it seems like that. Yeah, he's not going anywhere. But I think that there is some aspect of once that the Republicans realize that the ship, no matter if it's sinking or if it's floating, is Trump's ship, I think that they're going to have no other choice than to rally behind him. Because the alternative is that they just don't have any power. They don't have any say in mainstream media. They're just out. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with fighting for someone that they clearly despise. Even if in front of Republicans, they're like, yeah, we're pro-Trump. I mean, Tucker Carlson, he's like, yeah, I believe in the voter election. And then behind closed doors, he's like, why do I keep on having to talk about this? You guys are so stupid for believing it. And so it's like, even if they, behind closed doors, we all know that they want Trump to fail because they know that Trump is doomed in the general, even if he does well in the primary. I think that they're going to realize that they're tied to that ship no matter what. So they're going to do their best to keep it floating. Even if I think that it's doomed, I hope.
No, they are. You're right. But like the voters outnumber them, and the voters love it, and they're stuck. Like they have no choice. I hope Trump stays alive. I pray for the health of Donald Trump every night before I go to bed. Because he's our best chance of winning. So yeah, I give him the choice. Like I want Trump to live. Like he needs to run.
I think that Trump is the only Republican Biden won't lose to.
Okay, so in question, how do you guys feel, and this is slightly separate but related with Biden going against Trump? I, as someone who's a Georgia voter and from Georgia, so obviously I'm actually from Fulton County, so talk about feeling famous. My one thing is that, and I know that we're going to be talking about it in other segments, so you guys can go check that out, but with climate change and all that, the idea that Biden is a slam dunk versus Trump, I agree that like mentally I'm like, okay, we're talking about him going to jail right now. Like Biden is a corpse on many drugs that is propping him up and therefore keeping up the status quo. But with that said, I worry that because Biden hasn't done enough in terms of delivering on his promises, especially for young voters, part of me, am I the only one that's a little bit worried that Trump could I don't even know if he could win. I just worry that Biden won't do well enough to where he could even do anything for the next 4 years.
This is, I don't want to try to dominate the conversation. This is the last thing I'll say about that because I want to address that. I stand by the theory that Trump's election in 2016 was an absolute fluke. Like I got a weird coincidence that like everything, the stars aligned, that Clinton wasn't terribly popular and no one took Trump seriously. And so a lot of people didn't vote for Clinton because they didn't like her. And they said, there's no goddamn way Donald Trump's going to win. And then he did. And after that, people did take Trump seriously. So there's no pro-Biden.
Seriously is a stretch, but I understand what you mean.
Say what?
Seriously is a stretch, but I understand what you mean.
And so, the whole thing was just an anti-Trump movement. And that vote is going to stick. Like the people who say, no goddamn way, we're not having Donald Trump, that force is coming out. And that's why I think he's a slam dunk against Trump, because it's not about him. It's going to be about people voting against Trump.
But I guess for me, and this is, sorry, I don't mean to dominate the conversation either, so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I agree with you, Leah, that I don't think that young voters are going to turn out in the same way that they did. But I think that the majority of people that aren't in that young voter block are still going to do the anti-Trump vote just as vigorously as they did in 2020. But what were you going to say?
I hope so. I was just going to bring up gerrymandering in terms of also with like the election. Obviously, this whole indictment is over Trump saying that the election was stolen, and a lot of states use that as a response to, tighten their gerrymandering laws. Like in Georgia, you're not allowed to give water to people in line, no matter how long we're there. Like I had to spend 3 hours in line to put a vote against Herschel Walker. Like I think that maybe that's why, like my opinion of this is maybe so cynical, is that I just kind of see it and I'm like, with all the gerrymandering, with how hopeless it feels, that even with how many charges are we at? Like we're over 100 for sure. But I don't know exactly the number of charges.
It was 162 just in this one.
So we're definitely high up there. And with that, the fact that we're still having these conversations of will he actually feel the repercussions of his actions, I feel like people have lost faith in the idea of even voting, and for what, especially when it comes to Biden with the climate stuff. We'll cover that later. But I think that that's my thing with this indictment that just makes me so worried, is that all the conversations are, will he still have consequences? And I'm like, how messed up does our system have to be where we have 160 plus charges and we're still wondering if this political person will see any consequences for their actions? Like we have them, like you said, like we played the tape, like we have him literally saying, I am doing the crimes. Could you do some more crimes for me, please? I would like your help in doing these crimes, which makes sense then for the RICO charges and all that. But like, damn, I don't know. It's just one of those things of like, how screwed are we in terms of the next decade if these are our options, and if our options aren't going down with even 160 plus charges?
Erica, we haven't heard from you yet. What do you think about this?
I think it's so hard to tell what's going to happen with any of this. Scholars, lawyers, constitutional scholars have no idea what's going to happen. You hear them talking about this, they are baffled. There's so many unprecedented things about what's happening with this case. But I do think that, yeah, this is the big one. They brought out all of the big guns with these RICO charges. They are literally painting Trump and his co-conspirators as a criminal organization, which is like on par with like the mob. They're using laws that were designed specifically to go after the mob, and that are so elaborate and so comprehensive that they can kind of cast a wide net and potentially really nail all of these people involved. A lot of the co-conspirators, they're likely to flip. They're likely to start talking. I think this could really be the one that gets him, but I don't purport to know anything about what's actually going to happen, how this is actually going to go down. There are like you say, Leah, the variable of like just the public and Trump supporters and how apeshit they're going to go if he is charged with these things and he is locked up. I hope and pray that we will see him locked up for the rest of his life and that he won't be a threat to our country, our political system, to the world anymore. But yeah, I don't have as much hope that he was just a one-time win. I think that he's carved out such a space for himself and is so in charge of the whole Republican Party, the whole right wing in this country now, that everyone has had to line up behind him, and they're willing to give up on the things that they even believe in so that they can just have a little bit of that power and benefit from the power that he has gained. I think he's going to continue to be that person in American politics unless we lock him up. And that's why they're trying to throw the book at him, throw the library at him.
It is crazy how much the loyalty to Trump has made Republicans, from politicians to media pundits to everyone, just twist themselves into pretzels defending something they know is wrong. Like, I made a TikTok, and we'll play the clip here, of Ben Shapiro in 2014 was literally on Larry King's show. And he basically said, yeah, no, a president needs to be held accountable because the executive branch has been giving so much power and they've just been getting away with trampling all over our rights for so long. And if they're not held accountable, they'll just continue to do it. And it was so clear and obvious, like what 2014 Ben Shapiro would have thought is that, yeah, the president should be held accountable. And every single conservative right now who's saying, oh, this is a political witch hunt, this is a banana republic. I see that term being thrown around a lot on the right. We're just trying to target political opponents. Like, no, we have the tape. We all heard it. You heard it too. We all live in the same universe where we heard him saying, I'm committing crimes. And like, that's the thing that like blows my mind here about this one, is that they sit here and they're like, oh, he didn't actually mean it that way. He didn't mean, and it's like, if your boss tells you, hey, I want you to do this illegal thing for me, and they're like, well, honestly, I feel like you're going to get in trouble if you don't do this. What your boss is saying, like your boss doesn't even have to be that explicit for you to understand damn well that he wants you to break the law, if you've ever been in that situation before. And to hear Trump do if this was someone writing a mob movie and they wrote out a mob, like a mob boss threatening a public official like this, I'd be like, that's really shitty writing. No mob boss is that stupid. but here we are. And I do think there is a legitimate plausible deniability of, I don't know if Trump actually had a whole conspiracy in his mind. I don't think Trump really put all of these things together in his own mind to try and overturn the election. I think that he had people around him who were doing that and manipulating him into doing so, because I don't think that the guy who set up the press conference at Four Seasons Landscaping was really all that with it and this criminal mastermind. But that doesn't mean he wasn't part of a conspiracy to commit a crime and the head of it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that he's innocent.
My one thing that I think is, just to jump off of that I think is so interesting from, again, the Georgia Fulton County perspective representing, I'm going to keep on saying that because really this is my claim to fame. But is the thing that these RICO charges, God, this is going to be the most right-wing thing that I could probably it's going to come off as right-wing. But I think that it's interesting that they're using RICO charges because in this case, it is very legitimate to cast that wide net, to round them up, say that they were all part of this conspiracy, because it's very obvious, like you said, it's on the tape where he's like, do this for me, it is a crime. And that fits RICO, of you have a network and you're using that network to do illegal things. But But I think that it's interesting considering the fact that Atlanta has used RICO charges recently in the past few months for Cop City protesters. And saying that like the Atlanta bail fund is going up against RICO charges because they're saying that they are, you know, helping domestic terrorists, aka Cop City protesters, by offering them support. And I think that it goes to show to me how interesting our justice system is, because not only are Republicans twisting themselves into knots to do, you know, to fit the narrative, but on top of that, I feel like our systems right now are getting all sorts of twisted into knots, because even in Atlanta, like, we can't get it straight of like, are we doing the BS charges or are we actually going full head on for the president? And it's like the same person who is prosecuting people who are defending a forest is the same person who is chasing after Trump. It's the same office who's chasing after Trump for legitimate reasons. And I think that that goes to show how capitalism will twist itself into knots to maintain the status quo. And in this case, it means that the status quo is that we can't have a president that's as unpredictable, that's as insane as Trump, because it is something that the system can't control. And it's also in a direction that doesn't serve the elite anymore, because he is the powerhouse. He doesn't listen to the lobbyists. He does whatever he wants. Not that he's doing it for the workers, because he's 100% not. He is lying through his teeth whenever he says populist policy. But I do think that it's just this interesting thing where we're seeing so many fractures in our system of, like you said, like Ben Shapiro in 2014 was all down for holding people accountable. But when it comes to holding anyone else accountable in the past, like, I don't know how long Ben Shapiro has been alive, but literally all of our presidents are war criminals. So it's just like, to me, it's a very interesting time to be alive, in the sense that it has to go after someone to maintain the status quo, because Trump, he was unpredictable bad, but it also has to, in some ways, disenfranchise people and others to maintain the same system. And I think that that's just something that's really interesting with this indictment, and specifically with the RICO charges.
Leah,
I just wanted to add there, because I want to correct that the RICO charges never actually came down for the activists in Atlanta. Yeah. It was proposed, and there was a lot of, like, you know, hype about maybe this is going to, you know, I did a few episodes about this, talking with some of the Cop City protesters, that those never materialized, even though they were kind of laying the groundwork for that. But yeah, just like you're saying, they have used, you know, RICO charges potentially against protesters that they're calling domestic terrorists for things as little as occupying a forest,
Stephen
sitting in a
Donziger.
tree. Yeah, and then I was going to bring up Stephen Donziger, who I spoke with about his RICO charges. These are, you know, there are very illegitimate uses of RICO, which we have been seeing, and I have been railing against on my show in multiple episodes. But there are also these very, very, very legitimate uses of RICO charges that are not just going after Trump, but also going after the fossil fuel industry for planning and coordinating that they were going to, you know, they were going to deceive the public about the impacts of their industry, and, you know, kind of coordinate that they could continue to make profits and hide the truth from the public. So yeah, two very different sides of this coin using this justice system.